Well, good morning, good evening, or good night, depending on where you are in the world today. I know it's morning where Laura is, and it's mid afternoon where I am. But Laura, how are you doing?
I am fine, thank you. And how are you?
I am very good indeed. Thank you so much for asking. I would like to take a quick moment before we do this deep dive to kind of do a little bit of a plug for the work that you've already done and just how things have shifted for me already. So, as our audience will know, I've only read up until up until our last session, I'd only read the first four chapters of the book. And already last week, I started to notice how just having done that, without really making a conscious attempt or effort
Mhm.
to start being more present, I automatically was more present in my day to day dealings. Now, I'm fairly sure that does have something to do with my previous self work that I've done, but it was just so incredible to me how quickly that shift happened and how quickly that change happened to the point where I actually managed to have two, no, I lied, three yoga and meditation sessions last week where I used to do it every single day. And I haven't done it at all for probably the last 8 or 9 weeks.
Wow.
And this last week, I managed to fit in short sessions, but still 3 sessions in. And I can feel how much more aligned I am and
Nice.
less judgmental of not just my boundaries, but also other people's interactions with them. And that to me was already just so empowering because I'm the kind of person who will, if I'm not aligned, if I'm not feeling empowered and somebody steps over my boundaries, I will allow it to happen and I'll get angry that it's happening and angry at the person for doing that.
Mhm.
But I will still do whatever it is that's been requested of me,
Right.
and I'll do it with resentment in my heart. And
Right.
that's not how it's supposed to go. Right? And
No.
I'm just seeing how over the last couple of days, people will be like, oh, can I speak to you? And I'll take a moment, which I always used to do, but I stopped doing, to check in and go, okay, where am I? Am I able to receive? Am I able to share? Am I able to take something on? Am I able to hold space? Yes, no, maybe, and respond accordingly. And it's just so incredible how quickly that then shifts things. Because then when somebody does come to you with a problem, and normally when I'm out of alignment, I will then take that on and I'll hold on to that negativity.
Yeah.
Whereas now, and this is just after reading now up until the end of chapter 7, I'm starting to see how I'm able to hear what somebody is saying, really listen to them, hold that space without judgment and without taking it into myself. And
Yeah.
that is just,
And that's such a unique and empowering skill that I personally feel is our birthright to own it
yes,
and to live it out, but we lose it. And we lose it for so many obvious reasons and not so obvious reasons. And this is what I love about the science of empowerment. It is this formula of writing and receiving knowledge, right? That triggers a knowing within and gives almost or grants this permission to move into that space so beautifully. And it doesn't mean that it'll happen every day and every time, right? We'll be tested. We'll have better days. We'll have days that maybe we can't move into that as quickly, but there it is. And it's amazing to be able to see it, observe it, recognize it, and then continue the mastery of it.
that is, I think, so important to continue the mastery of it. And I'm so glad that you brought up the points which I'm going to get into because it is in my notes to go out over today with you. Little bits about why we lose that innate talent because it is our birthright. It is something that we are born with. And yet, somewhere along the line, we make an unconscious choice, I believe, to rather attach ourselves to the negative, to the injustices that have occurred to us. And I find it so intriguing because this was kind of brought out quite heavily in chapter 5 of the book, that we not only attach ourselves to it, but we then we carry this battle,
Yeah.
right, to these what you call elapsed injustices, which I love that. I'm like, that's so true. This injustice has lapsed. It's gone. It's done. And yet, not only do we cling to it, we carry this battle standard with us through life.
Yeah, we literally, if we could have the ability to see, and I'm going to use this metaphor, the suitcases of our injustice. First of all, we wouldn't be able to hold them. They'd be under our arm, around, they'd be in a backpack, they would be tucked in our legs. We carry so much of this, and we've lost that ability to not only put it down, open it up, clean it out, and let it go. We just keep collecting it. And then that's when, this becomes who we've become. However, let's be honest and fair to ourselves. It is a unique challenge to know what that skill and that mastery will look like if we've never known how
Oh,
it
absolutely.
feels to let it go. And I think this is just part of the human condition and the part of natural evolution, is understanding that even when pain and struggle and challenge comes in, we do have the innate ability to release those injustices. And that's what they really are, because we didn't come into the world in physicality to hold negative energy in. We came in to let it move through us, understand the reasoning, so that we evolve to a higher sense of self, so that we start to pull in more peaceful, more resonating experiences, right? That support growing and advancing, not the weight of these stories.
Thank you for bringing up the fact that there's that energy that allows us to grow and advance that we're not letting in when we're holding on to these injustices. And to use a personal example and personal experience, I remember a family dispute that happened between myself and my aunt. And to the point where for years I refused to speak to her. I refused to, if somebody brought up her name, I'd be like, I don't want to hear about that person. I'm not interested. Do not speak to me about her. And there would just be this vitriolic boiling up inside of me of this anger, that as if the wound had just been created,
Yeah.
right? As if that it had just happened. Meanwhile, it had happened several years ago. And one of my friends said to me, he's like, are you ever going to let that go? And I quite proudly at the time said, no, I will take this grudge to my dying day. I swear it'll be me and my ulcers to keep me warm at night when I'm old. I'm going to keep going. And I look back at it now and I'm like, well, all of that anger and vitriol,
Yeah.
right, really did keep me from a phenomenal teaching moment.
Yes.
An incredible learning that I could have had a lot earlier. I had it eventually, right? I
Yes.
got there eventually, but it took me really years of just holding on to it. And as I was reading through chapter 5, the question that kept coming up for me was, okay, but how do you let it go?
Right.
How do you let go of these kinds of things? And then it was just so beautifully brought out in chapter 6 when we're talking about the fraudulent ego,
Yeah.
and how essentially what's happening is we create this fictional reality around what's actually occurred. We choose to not see an issue for what it is. We choose to not confront it for what it is. And in so doing, we allow it to continue to have power over us.
And we create many branches off of that main tree of it, and we don't really stop to ask, what is this doing for me or to me? What is the purpose that it's
Mm.
serving? And for many of us, we really we almost get locked into that state of stagnation because we don't want to move through that initial sensation. So, in other words, fear comes in, anger comes in, judgment comes in, and it's for some reason our psyche really partners with those emotions so much quicker and they solidify so much faster than going in, doing the work, and saying, where is the forgiveness? Why am I not reaching out to this person and just expressing something's off? Right? We're off balance, we're off center. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to hold this anymore. We dig in deeper. I'll hold this till the day I die. Like, what part of our brain actually is, how do we not observe that? What is that? Why would I hold on to
Right.
anger? Or so, oh, there's a lot always to unpack here. So
I'm so happy that you are feeling as passionate as I do about this,
yeah,
because this is exactly how I felt. When I finally let it go and just honestly let it go, I looked at it, I was like, okay, where did this come from? Was there a grain in truth in what was done and said? Possibly. Where does it come from? Okay, well, the old saying of hurt people, right? That's just how these things work.
yeah,
But I think what actually really blew my mind was exactly what you just said, of when you look back and you go, why on earth
yeah,
did I consciously choose to hang on to, like you say, dig my heels in deeper and
yes,
go, no, I'm going to hold on to that and I'm not letting it go. And that's just how it's going to be.
mm,
Which I think brings me to one of the main questions that I wanted to ask you today. And I'm fully aware that this is going to be a very subjective, not objective answer.
mhm,
But what is your take on why we do that? Why do we, and actually, before I finish the question, one of the things to our audience that is brought out in the book is that as a species, we tend to associate ourselves more easily with the negative than the positive. Now, I know that to be true. I've read studies on this, but from your perspective, why do you think that is?
yeah. I really believe in my heart through my own writings and through just research about this is it happens at such a young age that we don't understand it as we grow. So when we are in the womb, our mother's energy and activity and the way she moves through her life is already energetically affecting our own environment. If she
Mm,
is sad, if she is scared, if she is lonely, if she is going through emotions, there's an actual energy and frequency that's moving through her system. We are in her system. Then, when we come out, whatever that environment is, we are automatically the very first person that touches us, the voices that we hear. And you can imagine where this story can go, right? All the way through the car ride home, where we're placed, what is the sounds and the texture of our environment. Then, when we start hearing, no, don't do that, you shouldn't go there, don't explore that, listen to what I say.
mm,
We are fed in this human experience is set up so our caretakers, however beautiful or non-beautiful they are, it already starts to set up and wire the pathways in our brain. And what will happen is, let's say we're supposed to be like this and there's abuse or anger or dysfunction, they'll go like this, then they'll go like this, and they'll
mm,
start to get distorted so that the flow of everything you can imagine that's happening in the chemistry of our body is disrupted, and then it's distorted. So we lose this ability to feel this freedom and this exploration of love and kindness and forgiveness, because for most of us, our upbringing and our environment is in quite opposition of that. And it's not that it's meant to, and it's not, and I write about this in the book, it's not to blame and put blame
Yeah.
out to anyone. But think about all of us as kids when we go to school. Most all of us had some experience with either a teacher that wasn't very kind, or certainly a student, or we've gotten bullied. And look what we go through. So the outside environment is a bit of a jungle, and it's a lot of negativity, it's a lot of distortion and disruption, and we take that on and it becomes familiar. And then we learn to adapt and cope within that environment rather than
Mm.
have the environment of, again, calm, love. How many of us grew up with a mom and a dad that really fostered exploration into self? Hardly any of us, because they don't know what that is. And even if our parents had doctorates in psychology and advanced human thinking, they still are a product of even that locked in scenario. So there's reasons why we gravitate towards the negativity much easier. It's what we know. And even though we all have moments of beauty and sparks of joy and forgiveness and love and exploration into self, pretty much the main journey that we travel on is quite challenging and bumpy. And it just
Oh,
feels
absolutely.
familiar. So that's why you held on to anger. If we went back into your path from the past, there's reasons why the anger and the partnership to it was much more sensible to you than the forgiveness and the
Mm.
release of it, right?
Very, very, very interesting and very true. Because I know also you mentioned in, I think it's chapter 7 of the book, talking specifically about children, actually. You
Mm,
talk about how children, sure, have less developed coping mechanisms, so they can dissolve into tears over something seemingly silly, but they're very capable of releasing. And we know this
yes.
because you see a child, having an absolute fit of tantrum and sadness and all the rest of it, and you flash them a chocolate, or they see their best friend or a puppy, and sadness gone, forgotten, done, and off we go,
Yeah.
right? And you then mentioned that at some point we actually lose that ability to just let it go. And you mentioned something very interesting now around, well, I'll actually talk about discipline specifically, because I noticed we just got a puppy at home, and we're trying very hard to do the positive reinforcement thing.
Mhm.
So instead of, just going, no, don't do that, and no, don't do that, very congratulatory when he does the right thing, right? And over the top congratulations and all the rest of it. And I was actually thinking about that this morning when I was just going over my notes again. And now, again, when you just mentioned around being able to release and let go, and also what our parents and the people around us, teachers, etc., did when we were children.
Right.
And something springs to mind from a book, which I'm sure everybody's heard of, but I don't think many people have actually read, and that is The Jungle Book. And I don't mean the Disney version, I'm talking about the original Rudyard Kipling Jungle Book. And there was one portion that really struck me. It was when Mowgli does something, I can't remember what it was, he does something naughty, and he's just a cub. And the mother wolf smacks him, cuffs him around the ear with her paw, and that's it, it's done. And the author then goes on to say, unlike humans, jungle law is that when discipline has been meted out, the offense is now considered erased,
Right.
completely gone. And I remember reading that as a child and going, but that's not how we are as humans, right?
It's quite the opposite.
Right? So instead of, when we now say our piece, or when a child is naughty or disobedient, and we get a meet out punishment, whatever the case may be, or discipline, we don't then just let it go. It comes back out, and it now, I mean, it comes up in memes. There's that old thing of, you ask your girlfriend what's wrong. She says, nothing. I just think it's funny how on December 2nd of 2017, you were doing X, Y, Z.
Right.
And it's like, why do we not just let things go? But that's, I think, exactly why.
And again, Mother Earth is a structure of live resonation. There's a vibration in everything. And we forget that we are moving ions and atoms and particles. We're flowing. And when that flow is disrupted from, and then you can fill that in, a negative sound, right? The tonality of somebody hurting you, it moves in it like it's an infusement of, oh, what did I do? Is that my fault? And it seeds in fast. And we don't have the ability to observe, oh, this came in. This is the purpose to it. And now I release it. It comes in, it settles. We find a place for it. We might push it down deep, but it's there and we don't let it go. There's no back door or even another front door. We welcome some things in consciously or not. And then some of us find ourselves in environments where things are happening and we are innocent in that environment. But again, we've lost this knowing and this ability that when the lessons come in, they're there to teach self-evolution and then release. We just don't have that set up. I've often said, how unique would it be to create a pilot program in a school where from kindergarten on up, we taught the science of empowerment? What would happen to those individuals 18 years later? What type of humans would they become when they knew very quickly on, right? Something's coming in at me. I see it. It's a part of my present and future experience, but not the resonation left behind, not the residue. Just the experience is here to teach me to continue to grow. We just don't have, life isn't set up that way.
It's not. And one of the things that jumped out of me in chapter 6, and I think this fits in so perfectly, both my sort of like, oh, that's going to be tough, and exactly what you just said about if we started this young, is it's brought out that we have to teach ourselves to be mindful every single second.
Yeah.
And my initial response was, good heavens, that's going to be tough. Like, that's really hard. And then I thought about it, I was like, well, actually, it's only hard because we have this pattern of not being mindful. Right? If we were taught to be mindful from a young age, if somebody had to say to us right now, I want you to not be mindful at all and just let everything come in, we go, no, that's impossible.
Right.
Can't do it.
Right. Because we've been born and bred to think that that's why chapter 6, the power behind the thought. Who told us to be this way? And then, of course, it's just the world, right? It starts at home and then it goes into school and then it goes into religious or spiritual practices and then it goes into our politics and it's everywhere. But that doesn't mean that we individually cannot begin to think differently for ourselves and understand that mindfulness really belongs on the upfront of every moment of every day. It's the lack of mindfulness that does not belong in our journey.
Right. That is, I want to actually just commit that to me. It's the lack of mindfulness that does not belong in our journey.
Yeah.
Okay. I was actually trying to see something in my notes because there was something that I deeply remembered. But I can't seem, oh, right, no, because I put it right at the end because it was really important. In regards to what you just said around the ego and the conditioning and all the rest of it and the emotional resonance that we have towards things. Right. Something that I often will say to my clients is, remember that emotions are just a communication.
Yeah.
That's all they are. They're just a communication from soul to tell you something is right, wrong, whatever the case may be, right? But what's happened instead is we treat emotions as the be all and end all.
Right.
We treat them as if these are reality, and they're not. They're just a communication. They're literally just a feeling, a communication from soul attached to an experience that we've just had that we can choose to release or learn from, whichever we're wanting to do. But like you say, it actually comes down to that brain conditioning then as to how we interact with the emotions. Instead of attaching undue importance to them, which essentially then becomes a distorted reality, we can actually just see them for what they are, which is a beautiful tool at our disposal.
Right. And again, so much of why this particular experience is, something that the mass population feels is because we're reactionary rather than responsive. And we are reactionary from a place of fear and
Mm,
insecurity and self doubt. We all have that. And again, this just is because of the way our life is. Very few of us are comforted in an environment that lends itself to, again, I keep saying this, but evolution and collective elevation. It's more someone else did not do the work to evolve and heal enough, then they bring little humans in, and then that goes on to the little humans. And then we try to at least cope and advance a little better than our parents did or our great grandparents. And we do. You can see where some things are
mm,
softened and maybe are less distorted, but it's in us. So when something goes wrong, our trigger is I'm scared. He's leaving me, she's leaving me, I'm going to be left alone, I'm going to be destitute, I'm going to be poor. All the divorces in the world, and the heartache, and a drug addiction, alcoholism, right? Someone has a heart attack, all of life. And we react from a place of, we're scared. We're scared. And then there's all these emotions. And then there's all this experience that justifies why I'm scared. Well, I was married and I had children and my husband cheated on me. Whatever the thing is, now I have a new relationship. So what do we bring into the new relationship? The fear, this new person, they're going to abandon me. They're going to cheat on me. They're going to disrupt the love that I naturally feel. I'm unhealed. You're unhealed. Our experience is unhealed. This book was written to remind the reader that yes, these experiences are real and they matter. What is not meant for us is the holding pattern connected
mm.
to the energy of the experience.
Right. Which is actually such a beautifully soft way of putting it, because I had a mentor who worked in sort of life coaching. Well, not professionally, it's just people would go to him because he had such a wide breadth of knowledge in this field, but he would be a little bit more harsh. So when people would tell their story, he'd go,
Yeah.
and they'd be like, well, like using the divorce thing. Well, and then he left and I was all alone. And and then they'd try and add on bits as to why this is important and why they're, and he'd go, okay, but you're choosing to stay there when it's done, it's dusted, you can't change it.
No.
So, and
I write about that, and it's the same energy. Someone tells you your story, and now what? We all have a story.
yeah.
Now what? What do you do with that? And that's exactly, so then you can hear how we marry ourselves to the story, how we will hold on to it till death because it's our identity. It's how we move through our day when we are like, why am I not? Yes, I'm hurt and I'm sad and I'm broken because at this moment I am fractured in a million pieces because I didn't expect whatever that outcome is. Now, how do we learn to grow into the knowing that we have the ability to recalibrate that so much faster and
Mm,
with quite skill to get us to move on rather than hold on, right?
right. And that is, I think, that is the skill that everybody would, I would think, kill for.
Right.
But coming back to the point about being mindful every second and how difficult that can appear to be at the outset. And I can imagine that for our audience listening to this, it's like, well, that's easier said than done. But you have such a beautiful statement in, I think it's chapter 6 or 7. Let me just have a quick look here. Chapter 6. Learn to value the responsibility of self accountable observation of the flow of energetic choice.
Yeah.
And I just, when I read that, I went, wow, okay. This to me, first of all, takes a lot of the pressure off of like, oh, well, I have to be mindful every second of every day. And rather goes, when you are mindful,
Yes.
actually take the time to value that. Show a little bit of gratitude to yourself for going, well, gosh darn it, I was mindful in that moment. And then that positive reinforcement starts to build and
And
build.
that's the relationship to self that we don't work on. This is why when things around us fall apart, we go into the negative realm of thinking because we put so much care and consideration into relationships outside of ourselves, even though I know they are an extension of parts of our desires and our dreams, but then there's expectations. So when
Mhm.
we have that connectivity to that mindful moment, that's where you value. That is your observation of self connecting to self. And that is a powerful place to recognize. Let that solidify so that it begins to balance the distortion over here. So when challenges arise, we're not so off balance. It's not the fear and the insecurity and the sadness and the struggle. There's more of, right, the mindfulness and the observance of self and the skill and the mastery of regulating that off balance. And
Mm.
thus in our lifetime we try to come a little bit more into perspective of balance rather than most of us are just whoop.
Yep. And it's a word of, I suppose, solidarity to our audience here. Don't think that, oh, it's just you. It's everyone. It's society that causes that imbalance.
Yes.
It's literally the entire world around us is designed
Yes.
almost to create a massive imbalance in what we're trying to achieve in ourselves and in our lives.
And it's that outward viewing of why is this so off balance? Because fundamentally it is within us that is off balance. And
Yes.
I believe that that is the journey in this human experience. It is to rise to a level of awareness so that consciousness or spirit or soul has the opportunity to recognize itself in this environment. And none of us really know, right? When the physicality is gone, what remains and where it goes. We all have beautiful thoughts of hopefully where we all go. And the soul needs to be skilled in the possibility that if we leave this behind, where will we be and what energy are we bringing into, again, that collective environment? So whether we're here on the earth or we're floating amongst the stars and the cosmos, we're vibrating. And why vibrate at this lower frequency when we have this ability to resonate at such a more beautiful kind of
Mm.
tonality in nature? And then again, it goes back to because the interior work needs to be done. And so many of us don't want to take that on. It's it's work.
It's work, and it's hard work. It's simple, but it is hard.
Yes.
right? It's
Challenging. Challenging.
challenging. Yeah, thank you. It's challenging.
Because it
Absolutely.
if we think it's hard, right there, we're just like, forget it. I already have enough hardship
Right.
in my life. Oh, okay. Challenge, right? Even I was thinking you and I eventually, when all of this gathers, we should do like a challenge out to the audience. Maybe it might just be a one podcast challenge, or maybe we'll do a 4 week challenge. And let's see collectively what happens when we come in with thoughts, and 4 weeks later, how those thoughts have changed by the science of empowerment, and see what happens. So when people have this real life experience of knowing, I do have that power, I am an empowered individual, I can put that down. Maybe not perfectly and beautifully, and maybe it's not at 100%, but even moving up that scale, it starts to seed the soul and the very essence of who we are, with the ability, the knowledge that I can do many things that I never thought I could.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Now, I'd like to, I guess, reel this in a little bit
Mhm.
into kind of a few final thoughts that really jumped out at me from the book as we start to wrap up today's episode. The one is, and I'll admit, as I was reading through this portion of chapter 6, I had a very strong pushback against it until it was explained a bit further. So
That's
it was talking about
wonderful.
it was talking about the we instead of the I, right? Talking about giving back to the collective consciousness as opposed to hoarding for oneself. And the reason that I experienced a bit of a pushback internally towards that was I was going, well, that sounds all well and good, but it can also be that you give too much of yourself and then you actually lose yourself, which then the very next page elaborates on that, and it did so beautifully. It talked about in the I versus the we, the important thing is to know the location of arrival at abundance so that you can honor the gratitude for it and then grant the overflow to others.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Chills up and down my whole body right now. That is just so, because I think we spoke about this last week as well. When you find something new and intriguing and interesting that has started to change your life, you want to shout it from the rooftops and
Right.
you want to share what you have with all and sundry. But it can so quickly get to a point where you are now, and apologies for the puppy barking in the background, but it can
Puppies
so
are
easily,
beautiful.
they are, and he's just the cutest, he really is. I'll send you photos later, Laura.
Yes, yes.
um, it can so easily get to the point where you're now pouring from an empty cup,
Right.
right? And like I say, then losing yourself in that. But if you are properly applying the science of empowerment, my understanding is because you're so much more self aware, you're able to recognize when you've reached that point with
Right.
complete clarity.
Yeah. And again, when you pull in the abundance that you know is not connected to greed and self-serving mechanisms, you understand, I have what I need. Everything else can now be given. That's it. How many, houses and cars and jewels and how much food, and this isn't about don't enjoy luxuries and don't dream big, and
Right.
that's not what this is. But this is again on in that essence of who we are as a collective family. I'm good. I am taken care of. Now I can give away. And that could be thoughts and feelings. It could be materialistic things. It could be knowledge. It's again an observation to the fulfillment of spirit and connectedness, and then giving where someone else is lacking. We're raising the vibration of one another as a global family. And until we do that, this will be a very off balanced planet.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Which I think brings me to my final point that I found so beautiful in chapter 7, because I was kind of thinking around this whole thing of giving back and all the rest of it, and just how that works. And before I actually got to this point, I was already thinking, because the book talks about how energetically we're all connected, right? Everything is connected. So what you put out, you get back, and what you put out, other people pick up as well. Whether it's verbal or nonverbal, people pick up on your energy. And that is why this work is so important, because if we do the work internally, if we commit to self evolution, you then automatically start to raise the evolutionary process of the entire planet, top to
And
bottom.
we don't quite understand that my little beautiful perfect self, and I mean that everyone, I matter. How I think matters. How I move through this experience matters, because I do have causation on the whole. And we don't really understand how important we all are to the entirety. And that's what I wanted to convey, especially in that chapter and throughout the book. We matter. We matter to ourselves and we matter to each other. And it isn't just about today and my life, it is about the legacy of humanity and how we all contribute to it. And until we contribute to ourselves and align with our highest and best, we are offering less than that out. So it is important to always remember it is we. It is we, it is not I.
Absolutely. Gosh. So I have so many more notes here. I think we could go on for another 2 hours or so.
I know.
There is so much in just these three chapters,
Yeah.
that I think will resonate with so many people across the globe.
Yeah.
So for our audience who are catching the replay or listening today, please do, as soon as you are able, get a copy of this book, read it, and start applying it from the get-go, because it will change your life.
Yeah.
I think I say that a lot, but it really will. It really, really will.
I know, and you want everyone to read it and just have it settle in the psyche and then move through the biology and then find its home again in the spirit of who we are. It isn't just a book and read a book, and it fundamentally shifts people, my readership, every person that has read it, that has reached back out, is like, oh my, where was this at this time? Or thank God it is here. And it really will transform the way that you think about life.
For sure. For sure. Okay. And I did forget to do this at the outset, but for everybody listening now, as always, please do remember to like this video and subscribe, whether you're watching it on Laura's channel or on the Wellness Lifestyle Conference. And do make sure to tune in next week as we continue this discussion a little bit further, as we get into, well, not start to get into, because we're already starting to get into the meat of the book now, really getting into
Right.
the deeper wisdoms that is just, it feels like every paragraph has something amazing to share. It really does. I actually was thinking that I want to gift this to one of my friend's daughters who's going through a really tough time at the moment. And as I'm reading through this, I'm just like, this is what she needs right now to kind of just be able to move through what is quite duly. I mean, it's not that it's her perception. It is a really tough time. But I think what so often can happen in our lives is, when we're going through a tough time, we can make it more than what it is. Or even if we don't, we sometimes are unable to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because
Yeah.
we're so in the moment.
And again, it's not read the book and whatever challenge you're going through in a snap of a finger, it will just change it all. But it allows you to have a sense of connection that you are a strong, capable, powerful human being. You will make it through this. And this is a guide and a partner for when we are going through challenging times. It's as if I was there with you. And that's what I really want the readership to know that I am speaking to you individually because this is such an individual journey when you read this book.
Right. It really, I mean, that's exactly how it's been for me, a very personal journey,
Yeah.
as I go through and unpack things and really start to do the exercises as I'm going along to kind of go, okay, what are these experiences teaching me? Are they legitimately bad? Are they legitimately good? Are they somewhere in between? And if so, what can I take away from that so that I'm able to continue in my evolution and not stay stuck and beholden to these lapsed battles?
Yeah. And always remember when we get the lesson, we will not pull in the experience again. There might be a variation of it, but that particular hardship and struggle and challenge that will begin to lessen the more skilled we become at releasing. Here it is. I see it. It's moving through. I've released it. We start to have a very different life when we let that current of experience flow very
Right.
differently than the taking in, stopping, holding. So this is really
For
about
sure.
learning to release and find our highest and best connection within.
I think that is a beautiful place for us to leave our discussion today.
Wonderful.
Laura, thank you so much for your time as always. I
Thank
cannot
you.
wait for next week's discussion.
I know.
It's gonna be so good, so 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 good. I'm so excited already. So yes,
I am excited.
please do join us next week, same time, same place on the Wellness Lifestyle Conference live, and that will be at 9 a.m. this time Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central European and South African Standard Time, and I think
And
that's
I
about it.
wanted to mention really quick, I don't know if you can put it anywhere in the notes. Everyone that purchases a book or the download, I offer a free 30-minute life empowerment coaching session on the book with them. So obviously international is download, and in the United States, it's the book, but it doesn't matter. So even like if you said, if you gift a download to your friend, she can call me. And honestly, I have people who then I go on and they become clientele. And there's this all around the book and this journey. So that's something really, I think, unique and powerful to take advantage of, that not only do you get the book, but you can Zoom with me and we can talk.
Thank you for that, Laura. I will definitely put that in the description below. So if everybody, the link to that will be in the description of this video below. And yeah, we look forward to next week with Laura Ballet.
Thank you. Have an
Thanks, everybody.
empowering week.
Thank you. It's same to you.
Bye.
Bye.